All right, I think we're going to go ahead and get going here. And just to make sure everybody's clear here, this is Bleeding Edge Web. If you're here for the other node meet, it's in the room across from us over here. And if you want to follow along, at least with these slides, the site is edgeatx.github.io/slides, or if you just go to edgeatx.github.io, it's got everything on there, slides, backslides from prior meets, all that kind of good stuff. And as I mentioned a moment ago, we're trying out a new Slack channel here tonight. Brian, what's it called? Is it Live Meetup? Is that the name of the channel? Yeah. I think the channel's called Live Meetup. Yeah. So, but it is an invite room, so if you want to participate, send a message over to bleedingetx@gmail.com, and Brian will get you hooked up. So, by a show of hands, first-timers? Okay, fair number. Welcome. So the way that we usually do this is we start off with news from the Bleeding Edge, which is our recurring segment. Then we'll do a deep dive. Today will be Road for Node with Evan, and then we've got a couple of lightning talks lined up tonight. But that's our typical format. Afterwards, some of us will usually head on down to Buffalo Billiards just for socializing afterwards. So you're all welcome to join there if you'd like. I'm Corey Butler. I'm the co-organizer. Brian Mosquier here is the primary organizer. And then I'll let Evan introduce himself when he's ready to go. So first, thanks to Capital Factory for letting us use this space here. And you can thank PayPal for the pizza. Do you have anything you want to say about PayPal, or no?
So I'm Keith Burns. PayPal. Yes.
So,
like the pizza.
There's Keith from PayPal.
Thank you for pizza.
Real quick, I mean, I know that there's other time after this and stuff like that, but we are looking for people, so if anybody's interested, especially if you have any strong front-end people that would like to do some of this stuff but can't do this right now, and once they place where they can do that, come talk to me afterwards.
So for anybody watching online, strong front-end people, is what you said, right?
Yeah, a particular position that would benefit from a very strong front-end person. Doesn't have to be necessarily full stack right now.
Okay.
And if somebody wants to kind of use that as an entryway.
So primarily, I just forgot what you said. Primarily front-end solution, kind of a developing role, okay. It sounds like. So. Okay. All right, great. So thank you again. So we'll go ahead and get started with news from the Bleeding Edge. And for those of you who have been here several times, we're going to start with our browser update with the browser pop quiz. So does anybody other than Brian know this is where we were last month with the versions of Chrome 45, Firefox 41, Opera 32, Edge 13, and Safari 8. Does anybody know all of the new ones? Does anybody know one of the new ones?
Safari 9.
Safari 9, all right. Chrome 46. Firefox. Okay. Opera. Edge. No? Okay. So we've got Chrome 46. Firefox hadn't released. Normally it releases about this time, but it's still on 41. Opera is at 33, which tracks Chrome. And Edge is at 13 plus, is what I called it this time. If you weren't here for last month's talk, there's a link on here to the Microsoft Edge versioning, because it's really based more on the Windows build than it is on a specific version, the way that the other browsers are here. But as was mentioned, we do have Safari 9, so finally have an update there to talk about tonight. So Chrome 46 didn't have a tremendous number of releases, but there were a couple of interesting ones. Well, you can see on the screen here right now, hopefully this is large enough. Let me zoom in a little bit. That's not really going to help. All right. Well, what's been released is simplified CSS motion paths. So I use the word simplified very loosely because when you look at the code here, you'll see an SVG that's embedded into the code. That's not so bad. The trick here, or the new feature, is this motion path and motion offset attribute. And basically, what you can do now is you can specify an SVG path and animate across that path. So this is a more simplified way of approaching it than it used to be. If you ask me, it's still pretty complicated there. But that's basically the new attribute that you can leverage with 46 here. And then if you want to, you can take a look at this code. The JavaScript to implement this, it does still require JavaScript to implement. The key pieces are in here. To be completely honest with you, I don't know how many people are actually going to be using a lot of this unless you're doing a lot of more intense UI stuff, a lot of animations. This little house with the cutout here down here is a more complicated example, which if you check out the link, you can really see how all this is how this works. But this is kind of what this was what Chrome 46's updates led off with. So your mileage will vary depending on what you do in the web. The other larger focal point for Chrome 46 was automating resources selection with client hints. And this really has more to do with responsive design, specifically with images. So if any of you have had to put together a page with multiple sources, identifying the different views, widths, all that kind of stuff, you might see something kind of like what's on the screen here now. And using client hints, this smaller, far reduced set is what you're able to leverage now. So the key here is taking a look at this content attribute of the meta tag with the DPR, viewport, width, and width. And then noticing that in the picture, the source media in particular, you really only need to specify whichever size you want to use. And then you can leverage that with the image sizes tag. Attribute. So ultimately, there's one little quote here that I found that I think is kind of interesting. The answer to a good and sustainable optimization strategy for images and other resources with similar properties is simple: automation. If you're hand tuning your resources, you're doing it wrong. You'll forget, you'll get lazy, or someone else will make these mistakes for you, guaranteed. And so that's really what this update is all about: is simplifying that picture tag and being able to automate a lot of the process that you would normally have to go through by hand to identify which source of an image to use in any particular screen size. So again, your mileage will vary depending on how you use this stuff, but I do encourage you to check this out because it is a really drastic simplification if you've had to do this stuff in the past. With a little bit of ES 2015 goodness, the spread operator is now available in Chrome 46 by default. So if you've ever had to apply a function, you pass in a couple of attributes, the scope and then the arguments. Now you can just use the 3-dot syntax. So specifically down here in the bottom example, the my function ... args. That can really be used to identify anything. And similarly, you can intermix that with other kinds of attributes. So like the commented out function here on the bottom, the -1, comment ... args, 2, and so forth. It's basically a way to kind of say, give me everything in between. So that's kind of an interesting update. That's been around in some of the engines under a flag for a little while, but now that's available natively with 46. There's also the new .target, and this is more for those of you doing object-oriented types of things, so with classes in particular. So if you look at this code is identifying a parent class and a child class, and then just not a constructor, a regular function. And for those of you unfamiliar, classes really just boil down to a function ultimately, but the constructor is the key here. So if you were to run this code, if you look at the bottom here, it'll say, hello from parent, I was constructed to be a new parent. Hello from parent, I was constructed to be a new child. So what the new .target actually offers you is a reference back to the original class from which anything is based. So in this case, the child is referencing the parent. If we were to add a second child, like class second child extends child, then you would see the same thing, that it's being referenced from second child. And then finally, with the not a constructor method here, you can see that there is no target child. So it just says my target is undefined. So the use cases for this may not be, you may not need this a lot. I write a fair number of my own micro frameworks, so I find this useful for just any kind of OOP-oriented stuff that I'm doing. And then on a performance note, Chrome 46 now has pre-connect. And this is actually fairly simple, but at the same time very powerful. So pre-connect essentially allows you to start providing hints at how you want network traffic to be handled through the browser. And that's kind of a first here. You haven't really been able to do a lot of that in the past. So if you look at this code, it's fairly simple here. The first line is referencing the CDN essentially for Google Fonts. The relation tag, or the relation attribute here states pre-connect. So it's saying, okay, I know that at some point here in the very near future, I'm going to go out and try to access the fonts.gstatic.com. And then, of course, the second line of code here is actually going out and retrieving that font. So if you look at the graph here on the top, you'll notice that the handshake, the initial connection, most people don't really recognize how much of your performance can be sucked up by DNS, SSL termination, essentially that handshake that's required to start communicating with the server at all. And when you start breaking that down into every image, every CSS file, every JavaScript file that you bring in, we've kind of gotten around this by minifying, concatenating resources, but this is another way where you can simplify the actual network activity. So you make one request and you say, okay, now what I've made a request here. I've said I know that I'm going to leverage the CDN. So now when I make that request, it only goes out once. The first time it goes out, it says I'm going to do this negotiation. I'm going to make this request, understand which server I'm communicating with, and then everything after that, you bypass it. So this little pre-connect thing here, you can see two separate lines of actual network traffic there. So this may seem kind of insignificant, or a lot of you may not really care all that much, especially if your applications don't really require a lot of performance gains. If you're not leveraging millions of users or millions of requests at a time, this may not really matter. But I think the most interesting piece of this is the fact that you're actually able to start providing hints at how to optimize your application to the browser itself. So I would imagine that we'll probably start seeing more of this with some of the other browsers as well, making way for a lot of very interesting things from a framework perspective, or just your general JavaScript library frameworks. And then finally, the event .isTrusted is new in Chrome 46. This is fairly simple. It's basically human interaction versus programmatic interaction for event handling. So in this code example, we've got a green button and a red button. If you look at the bottom here, you'll see that the listening to a click on the red button will actually generate a click on the green button. A click on the green button is going to look for this event.isTrusted. So if you click directly on the green button, the event.isTrusted will be true, and it'll say, okay, the user clicked on the green button. But if they click on the red button, that's programmatically invoking the click on the green button. So the result is that you basically programmatically made an interactive action as opposed to the user doing it. So this has a whole bunch of different security ramifications, especially if you start thinking about things like extensions. If people are using a Chrome extension in their browser, there's lots of ways that this could potentially be manipulated. So if you want to start safeguarding your code, especially with human interaction versus programmatic interaction, this might actually end up being kind of useful for you. And then finally, we have the ability to generate DOM exceptions from code. This has kind of been floating around in some of the dev and beta channels, but it's finally landed in Chrome 46. Again, maybe not terribly interesting for a lot of you, but if anybody is polyfilling out anything, or if you're dealing with web components, this could actually be useful for building more robust libraries. Oh, that's right, I forgot there are a couple of others. Chrome 46 also has the caching API is now only available via SSL or TLS. It's basically part of Google's initiative to only enable powerful APIs over secure connections. So that's just kind of a note there. And then finally, this has actually been around for a little while, but we don't talk a whole lot about mobile as far as the browsers go in this meet, but I thought this was kind of notable. So from Chrome 46 on mobile, push notifications have now been fully implemented. So if you are developing an app, like a web app, you can actually enable this and utilize the native notifications on your phone or on your Android. So that's about it for Chrome. Firefox, like I said, not a whole lot happened. There were a couple of fixes. Technically, the update is we went from 41.0.0 to 41.0.1. So I'm not really going to cover any of that. It wasn't really anything too interesting there. Opera 33, again, it tracks Chrome 46. So it added a lot of the same things that I just covered between pre-connect and new targets and spread operators and that good stuff. And so finally, Safari 9 is finally out. I've been waiting for it for a while. And I'd heard that we might see WebRTC in Safari 9. There was a little theme on Twitter for a while where there was a job posting for WebRTC engineer on Apple's website. And so that kind of brought up a lot of speculation that maybe we'd finally see WebRTC available in Safari. And no, it's not there. So that's not there, and overall, my impressions, yeah, it's there. Safari 9 didn't have a whole lot. I had really hoped for WebRTC. I like using that, but in general, there just wasn't a whole lot. But there are a couple things to take a look at. So there is this web inspector, which is something you kind of expect to have these days in any major browser. It is available on mobile as well. And this dives a little bit deeper into things, specifically looking at local storage. Again, a lot of the same kinds of things that you would expect or that you might see in Chrome DevTools or in Firefox's DevTools. And this one is a little bit more interesting. There is a responsive design mode, so you can select your device and it'll resize the page, the frame to show your content in that size. There are a couple of options other than just the Apple-specific ones. Again, kind of, all right, it's interesting, but not super exciting. You know, Chrome has had extensions for this for a couple of years now, and so has Firefox. And if you want to dive into the more Apple-specific side of things, Safari 9 does have an AirPlay API. So you can see this code here. If you do want to tap into AirPlay programmatically, you can. But I don't know if any of you caught the event name there, but it's WebKit playback target availability changed. That is 39 characters. Personally, I think my hands will fall off by the time I'm done coding something for AirPlay, given all the event names like that. And finally, Safari 9 has picture-in-picture capabilities. That's more of a native feature. Again, it's not something you're going to see on all the other browsers, so kind of use with caution. But again, you can see very, very long attribute names again. And then the ECMAScript 6, as they call it, enhancements. We've got classes and computer properties and weak set and some of the other things that you would expect, but honestly, the takeaway for me in reviewing this was more so that the documentation website still says ECMAScript 6, as opposed to ES 2015, and it just kind of states where I feel Safari is. It's kind of there, but it's not really keeping up with the bleeding edge the way that some of the other browsers are, and it boils down to things like terminology and some of the features that are available. You're pretty much looking at the feature set here available if you're trying to use more of the ES 2015 capabilities. And then Edge 13, or 13 plus. This is technically build 10.565. This is in the fast track, which Microsoft has broken it down into a slow track, a consumer track, and a fast track. Technically, they're all available to anybody, but the average consumer will be updated on the regular track. The fast track is really more for development, but honestly, most of the changes, it was pretty much a minor release. There were a couple of changes, but many of them were more consumer-oriented, like tab previews. So if you're hovering over a tab, you'll see a little screenshot of the page that you're looking at. The ability to sync favorites and reading list items, dragging and dropping for file uploads. Save target as is part of the context menu now. Again, something you can just kind of expect. That's kind of it from the consumer features. There's also the more developer-oriented stuff is they finally implemented the developer tools, the F12 developer tools. And that's really the highlight. The other two things are the CSS initial support and unset support, which most people aren't really going to have a whole lot of use cases for. But you know, it's there. You can check it out if you're interested. Yeah, I'm not even going to cover that. So libraries and frameworks. Really, the only couple of notable releases, and this was made yesterday, but Node 4.2.1, which obviously you're all here to hear more about Node 4, but last month we were at 4.0.0. So I'll talk a little bit more about this in just a second, very briefly. And then another one that we don't usually cover a whole lot is Semantic UI. Is anybody in here familiar or use Semantic? Got one, okay. So it's one of these libraries that I feel kind of doesn't get a whole lot of attention publicly, but you go out there, there's 20,000 GitHub stars, and it's an interesting library. So if you've never heard of it or are unfamiliar, I suggest checking it out. And this was actually an update from last month, but it doesn't get updated quite as frequently as some of the releases we talk about. So Node, there's actually a 5.0.0 release proposal that's been issued now. So if you kind of want to check that out, you can. It's all on the GitHub repository now. And there's now consideration of an iteration on the official logo. So if you have ideas for a new Node logo, you can click on this link and check it out. It's all on GitHub. And you can see what's in there. There have been a lot of people that have been posting. So there's some interesting stuff. And again, it's just an iteration. I haven't seen anything drastically different. But that's what's going on. So in completely different news, has anybody used Git LFS yet, the large file store? So this is kind of interesting. I haven't used it, but I think it's just interesting. You can actually track larger files, and if you can't read this, this top screen says Git LFS track star.psd, and then it states that you're tracking all Photoshop files. There's also a graphical user interface as well, and I just find this kind of interesting. So if you've ever had the desire to leverage Git on your own file system or for some of the larger files that you use, this might be kind of interesting. And if you are using it for any kind of graphical work, whether that be Photoshop files or static assets, PNGs, JPEGs, that kind of stuff, if you haven't seen it before, there's actually kind of a cool diff tool on GitHub as well that you can scan and see the differences over time. So just some interesting stuff happening with GitHub right now. And anybody in here familiar with daily.js? Okay, a couple. So daily.js, I actually really liked this resource for a while, but it shut down a while ago. And it's coming back possibly in a little bit different format. It was actually just released today that the guy that ran this, he had some life priority changes, just some different things going on, but it was a great little website for kind of getting in the know of what's going on with everything, not just Node or jQuery, but kind of all things interesting in the JavaScript and web world. And it looks like Cooper Press has taken an interest in this now, so there's no exact details, but if any of you have not checked this out, it might be worth checking out as soon as it does kind of come back. These are the same guys that do a lot of the weekly features, so like Node Weekly and HTML Weekly and that kind of good stuff. So upcoming events of interest. So here locally, API Strat is going to be here November 18th through the 20th. That's going to be at the Sheraton, not too far from here. If you are interested in attending, it's $3.99 if you can get in by November 5th and $4.99 after. It's not a terribly large conference, but this is kind of this is the first time that it's going to be held here in Austin. So hopefully it'll be interesting. And then this one's actually almost over, Hacktoberfest. This only goes through October, but if you want to get a free t-shirt or just kind of get involved in some projects, this is all run through, sponsored through DigitalOcean and through GitHub right now. So you pretty much just need to sign up. You have to do it real quick now because you only have a couple of days left if you want to. Open at least 4 pull requests on any GitHub open source repo. And then after the month is over, DigitalOcean will collect all your details and mail you out a t-shirt. And then finally, we've got Node.js Interactive, and though this one isn't local, I thought it was worth mentioning here. That's going to be December 8th through 9th at the Hilton in Portland. The early bird stuff is actually sold out now and or expired. So the standard rates apply now. It's $425 if you order before the 21st. And later on-site is going to be $525. And then finally, Node Knockout. That's going to be the 7th through 8th, and currently it's full, but the site indicates that there should be more spots opening up for new teams here, hopefully within the next couple of days. So if you are interested in that, go check it out. And that's all I've got here for tonight. So I'm going to get Evan. We're going to do a little shift change here, get Evan hooked up, and go from there. So thank you.
While Evan's getting set up, I just wanted to mention a couple of things. Number one, so for anyone who is in the Slack group, the conversation, the public conversation kind of goes up and down, and sometimes it looks like there's not that much activity. But interestingly, as a Slack organizer, you get emails every now and then where they tell you stats about your group or whatever. And the email I got last week said that, I forget how many total messages there were, but it said like 90-something% of them were private, which is interesting. So there's actually a lot of person-to-person communication happening and a lot of connections being made, even though it's not necessarily always reflected in our general chat room. So I thought that was kind of cool. So definitely, we just started it last month, so it's still pretty new, but hopefully it'll become an interesting place to connect with other folks in the group. And then the other thing I wanted to mention is if anyone has any announcements, like you're hiring or you're looking to be hired or anything like that, at the end of the talk, we'll have an opening for that, so keep that in mind. You ready to go?
Yep. All right. Jeez. Okay, I can just hook up to the HTML. Oh, yes. Just use HTML.
You can, yeah, if it'll, yeah, it'll. Although the only thing is, I'm not sure how to switch the input. This guy. I don't know that it. Fix it.
Shortcut working.
Yes. Working.
Got a screen.
Is your thing web-based?
No.
This is me. I just connected to co-working, so that's definitely it. Try it again. Co-working. That was me.
You can try HDMI.
Yeah, I just don't know how to switch the.
Yeah, I think I remember it. All right.
Technology.
Oh, nice. Anything?
It's amazing what we can build, but we can't put things on the screen.
There we go. Yeah.
You probably want to adjust the scaling level.
Working on it. The other side. There we go. All right, let me Yeah, I use Keynote, sorry. Come on. All right. All right, there we go. So this is the road for Node. Sorry for the creative title. About me, I'm a node engineer at help.com. We are hiring. I also am a core collaborator on Node as well as the Node.js website. Tonight, I'm going to talk about versioning, builds, different way you can contribute, and working groups, and kind of the migration from iojs to Node. Different governance, NAN for native add-ons, and then upgrading. So let's first take a look at the timeline. In March, Node 0.12 was released. Node 0.12 is what a lot of people are still running in production. And then 0.11, or 0.10, I'm sorry, I'm losing it. 0.11 came out, and a lot of people use that because it used an updated V8. There wasn't much changing on the Node front. A lot of issues had been opened, and there weren't many people triaging the issues. A lot of pull requests have been opened that weren't really attended to, and so iojs was kind of born out of that frustration by a lot of the core collaborators on Node at that time. So it was forked around Thanksgiving in 2014, and then the first release for iojs was in January. Right after that release, or not right after, but a little less than a month after, was the Node 0.12 release. And Node 0.12 didn't work out as well as a lot of people would have hoped. I think that the older, it used an outdated V8 from the beginning, and one of the things that iojs tried to improve on was using a newer V8 that brought these, ES 2015 features. So there had been a lot of talk about how we could prevent fragmentation in the community. A lot of people who are wanting to use the latest cutting edge technology were looking at iojs, but a lot of people weren't ready to run it in production. And so the biggest thing was, how can we get the best of both worlds? And I think that once iojs Technical Committee, or TC, joined the Node Foundation, that was a great step in the right direction. And then in September, Node 4 was released, and then the first LTS release was in October. So exciting. Let's talk about some of the differences. The new Node has switched to semantic versioning. It previously was an odd and even scheme. Odd was unstable, even was stable. So there was 0.10, 0.12, things like that. We moved to semantic versioning, which has been pretty popular in the Node community. And right now we're at Node 4. And actually, the first release candidate for Node 5 was last night. So I think that's planned on being released tomorrow. If not tomorrow, then Monday or Tuesday. Another change that the Node group, the people who have been contributing to Node, have been dealing with in official builds. So right now we support Windows, OS 10, lots of different Linux varieties, SunOS or SmartOS, different Solaris varieties, and then ARM is now like a first-class citizen, so that's a big deal. We have V6, V7, and V8. Those are actually in our entire CI cluster, so anytime a change is made, it has to pass on all of these platforms. And brings me to the tested platforms. We actually just recently added Windows 10 to our CI runs, and we've got FreeBSD, SmartOS, lots of different Linux varieties there. And recently we've added PowerPC for Fedora and Ubuntu. So that's been a big deal getting those on board. Some changes have had to go into V8, some have had to go into Node, but the people at IBM have been working on that quite a bit, so it's good to see. And then the ARM on our CI servers it's pretty neat how it's set up. It gets cross-compiled, and then it gets sent out to these different fan machines, and then each machine will run a subset of the test. I think we have 16 different machines now that have all been donated by people in the community, which is awesome. And they run, I think the test suite's about 1,000 tests, more or less. So it definitely speeds things up. Builds don't take an hour anymore. We're down to like 20 minutes, so that's exciting. As far as contributions go, that's something that I'm really excited about. You can see here at the end, in 2014, things were starting to go down. Contributions were going down. Activity was going down. Things just got stale, and pull requests weren't really merged. And then this right here, where it goes up, is going to be when iojs was first released, and right before that, there were a lot of people who came in and were trying to contribute, which was awesome. And that kind of leads into the different contribution and governance models that new Node has taken. As of last night, there were 401 members of the Node.js organization on GitHub, so that was really exciting to see. Those members are actually members of different working groups, like these listed above, or the main project. So there are more working groups than this, but these were some of the more prominent ones that I had seen. Build typically handles our CI servers and any kind of build issues. API is going to be more of a high-level group that will determine the API, a new API that will hopefully make integrating with Node easier. Benchmarking is going to be more for macro level benchmarking. Right now we have these micro benchmarks in the actual repository. This function call takes
so many nanoseconds. This benchmarking will be actual models in the ecosystem and things like that. Documentation, I think one of the biggest things with the docs is how can we keep them updated and maintained? And so a documentation working group has been started, which is going to be cool. And then help is a big one as well. Help is going to be for any Node.js questions that you have. You can go to, it's Node.js/help on GitHub. And whoever knows the answer can chip in. One of the cool things about the Node group on GitHub is if you make any significant contribution to a project, then they will open that project up to you and give you commit access. So that's something that's definitely a change from the BDFL model that Node had been in before. So that's exciting. Everybody's favorite thing, yes, 2015, I guess I should say. Yeah, so Node 4 came out with the same V8 that was in Chrome 45. And that introduced a lot of different things. Template strings are actually my favorite. But you have maps and sets, different collections, and there's also weak maps and weak sets. I guess I should go to those slides. These are just some basic examples. So template strings, you can multi-line strings or string interpolation, things like that. And we've actually found that template strings seem to be a little bit faster than string concatenation, so that's exciting. Basic maps and sets. Now you can actually use NaN as a key. I don't know if you want to, but hey, you can. So far, maps seem to be a little bit slower than using just a plain object, but in some cases they actually can be faster, so that's exciting. They also have, you can access the values and keys and entries as an iterator using for/of, which I like. Generators. These have been around a little bit longer, I think, due to when 0.11 came out. TJ Holloway-Chuck had written the Co library, which allowed using generators kind of as an alternative to flow control, or using callbacks as flow control. So they're definitely still around. Everybody loves promises. Almost everybody. Just another kind of syntax sugar on top of basic mechanisms, but promises have definitely come a long way. The native promises are a little bit slower currently, but that is something that is going to be worked on in the near future. They're said that they can make them as fast, if not faster than Bluebird, so all of you will be happy to hear that. There's block scoping. Now block scoping you should really only use it in strict mode right now because using const and sloppy mode is not the same. There's definitely some differences there, but there's const and let. There's some basic examples there. And I'll post all these slides after if anybody's interested in that. Symbols are exciting. Kind of give you the ability to add a somewhat of a private property. There's symbol.iterator, different things like that. So, and then there's arrow functions. That was I think that was the last one in V8 4.5 or Chrome 45. So on to governance. Node.js currently has a technical steering committee, and that technical steering committee is responsible for like the high-level guidance of the project. So essentially, when iojs was voted to merge with the Node.js core contributors, they combined to become the TSC or TC, as they've also been known. And so it was the core contributors from Node and then the TC from iojs. They followed consensus seeking process, versus the BDFL model. So if if there's anything that people don't agree on, then they will either get to a consensus, or they will punt to the next meeting, which I think is a really good thing with how big Node is getting and how much people are using it. What large companies are using Node, I think that there has to be stability with it, and I think that this definitely helps that. One of the rules is no more than a third of the TSC members may be affiliated with the same employer. So, in addition to the 13 TSC members, there are collaborators. Like I mentioned before, anyone making significant valuable contributions are made collaborators, given right access to the repository. They're given the ability to close issues, things like that. There also comes a responsibility with that, reviewing landing pull requests, anything that a consensus cannot be made on GitHub can be elevated to TSC meeting. So anything that's a major breaking change, anything simple major more or less, has to have somebody from the TSC kind of sign off on it. And they can either sign off on it, or they can say let's elevate it to a TSC meeting. So, but in total, the 13 TSC members are included in the 45 current collaborators.
Just have a quick question, actually, on the previous slide about promises.
Sure.
It's from the chat room. Someone's asking if Node itself plans on implementing promises from any of its core APIs.
As of right now, I don't see us changing the way that say FS is implemented. Now, as promises get on par, speed, performance-wise, with the callbacks, I don't think we will have any other choice.
Let's try changing lives. One might be dying.
Or am I just not talking into it?
No, it's cutting in and out.
Oh, okay.
Try this one.
You want to repeat that?
No, you're good.
Okay. Yeah, so maybe in the future, but as of right now, I don't see that being a short-term plan. Yeah, and feel free to stop me, flag me down if there's any more questions that come up. More details regarding the governance can be found in the Node repository. There's actually a governance markdown file on the top level of that. One of the more exciting things to me is NAN. NAN was originally written by Rob Fag. He is a member of the TSC, and it was written to make writing add-ons easier across multiple versions of Node. So I think that's been one of the pains with people trying to decide, hey, do we want to upgrade or not? Well, if you're depending on native add-ons, then that can definitely have an impact on your decision, especially whether or not they've upgraded to make it compatible with Node 4. The amount of changes that V8 has made from the version that was in Node 0.10 and 0.12 to the version that's in Node 4 is pretty significant, to the point where you have to rewrite quite a bit of stuff. NAN was written to help make things easier on that and prevent you from getting into a macro tangle. It supports 0.10, 0.12, all of the iojs versions, and then Node 4 and Node 5. Just to kind of show a difference between the two. Here's an example. Sorry if you can't read it, it's a lot. Here's an example of not using NAN. Lots of macros determining, is this version 0.10, 0.12, things like that. In comparison, there's a version using NAN. So if you're an add-on author, I would definitely recommend using NAN. It definitely makes things easier for you and your consumers. And this is just a basic hello world. As far as tools for upgrading, NodeSource has been a huge proponent of upgrading to Node 4. And they have different self-service tools. There's a blog post by Dave Lutz regarding some of those tools. One of them being upgrade utils. It looks for different APIs that have changed that are breaking, both in JavaScript and C++. And then Jeremiah from NodeSource actually wrote up a wiki document for all of the breaking changes from 0.10 to version 4. It's very useful. I would definitely recommend going through it. I will say I've been trying to get us upgraded at help.com, and really the main things that we've had to change have been build stuff. Different, like we had one gulp package I think that wasn't working. So it hasn't really been that much to upgrade. Yep.
When you were talking about test suites and stuff, do you also test some of the larger, like Express and Mongoose and those kinds of packages with these kinds of changes in mind?
Yes, absolutely. Now, Node itself does not in its CI runs, for example, but there is a smoke testing working group, I believe, and their job is to go through the most dependent on packages in NPM to make sure we're not breaking the ecosystem. So I can look into, I can't remember the exact link, but I believe the repository is under smoke testing. Next up is long-term support. So currently 0.10 is in maintenance mode, and 0.12 is in active LTS, and we'll go into maintenance mode in April 2016. 0.10 will not, let's see, it goes out of maintenance mode in October of 2016. With the new Node 4.2.1 Argon, that's a new LTS release. That will be in LTS until April 2017 and then goes into maintenance mode. So if you're gonna upgrade and it takes you a while to upgrade, I would definitely recommend giving that a go. And it'll make the upgrade process to Node 5 a lot easier, or to the next LTS if that's the way you're gonna go. But this schedule is made up by Rod Vag, so definitely a good way to look at it. All right, that's all I got. Any questions?
Can you go over some of the differences in the long-term support?
Yes, the long-term support, a good example of that are changes that were trying to be introduced into Node 4 this past week. A lot of things, anything that's breaking is not going to go into a long-term support release. We are going to do everything we can to avoid any similar minor changes, so any additions, unless it is related to a security issue, it's not going to be introduced in the long-term support release. But that will actually be maintained by the long-term support working group for the duration that it's in the long-term support category. So whereas in Node 5, when it comes out, it'll be supported for 6 months, I believe, off the bat. Whereas the LTS will be supported for the 6 months and then the 18 months after, I believe. And then it goes into the maintenance mode. Yeah. Anybody else?
So is Node 4 like really ready for prime time production use, or should we still be waiting on anything?
I've got stuff that's running in production on Node 4 right now. We have had some bugs come up. There have been a lot of changes, but I think that we're at a point now. I don't think that we would have introduced the LTS release without being at a point where it's production ready.
Is anyone running Node 4 in production? Anyone else?
What's everybody running? 0.10?
Yeah, 0.10.
Is anybody running 0.12? What's up?
So the switch from the BDFL to the technical governance model, so it was owned by Joint at one point, or they were the BDFL, the dictator.
I probably should have made that more clear.
Yeah, so who owns it now, or is it just like that?
Well, Joyent was the corporate steward of Node, and a employee of Joyent was the BDFL. And then when the Node Foundation was born, Node was transferred to the Node Foundation.
So it's just this foundation that votes people in, or who's deciding who gets placed there?
Well, the Node Foundation is a Linux foundation. What's the word? It's like sub-organization. There are companies that sponsor the foundation, and then there's the technical committee that was decided upon between the Node core collaborators, and the iojs technical committee had asked to, or had voted to join the foundation. So they are the ones, the TSC now as it's called, are the ones who are doing the technical governance of the project.
How big is the group now? The TSC in general, like how many people are involved overall?
The TSC is 13 members. Yeah, it was a few more when IBM acquired Strongloop. 2 members had to step up due to the third can't be associated with the same company. So. Anybody else? All right, cool.
Well, thanks.
Well, thanks. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Evan. And obviously, if any questions come up or whatever, between now and the end, feel free to ask him or pop into the chat room. Let's see, we have a couple of, 4 lightning talks scheduled if everyone's here. So in order, Ted is first if you're ready. Okay, Ted Patrick will be talking about views, which looks pretty cool. It's a oh, this room is cool. Yeah, are you on the private? Okay, so Ted will be talking about views, and then next up, let's see. I guess Rod, are you ready? Okay, Rod will be next. By the way, does anyone have any announcements? Hiring, firing? Yeah, one in the back.
You're fired.
Yeah, if it's actually tell me if it's firing, because I'm going to get my phone ready with video. Because that'll be home.
Yeah, I'm hiring Node developers. We're out from Living Direct. We're an e-commerce company. We sell keg graders, wine coolers, but we're out to build an e-commerce content CRM platform all in one that will really provide like a personalized experience. So it's something kind of revolutionary in the e-commerce world. It's going to be built on Node.
So Node developers for hire. What was the name of the company again?
Living Direct.
Living Direct.
Looking from junior, senior, as well as me.
And the one word I heard that really stood out was kegerator. So that sounds really pretty cool.
Yeah, we have kegerator.com as well as other sites, wine cooler, contact clients. But yeah, there's kegerators all over the office. We have free lunch Fridays, incoming table, work from home quite often.
So office here in Austin?
Yeah, office in Austin. So it's really a relaxed environment.
Okay. Sounds cool. So if you want to build kegerators using Node, talk to him. Anyone else real quick? Yeah, one right here.
There's help as well, and so Evan alluded to help.com's hiring. So we're hiring senior front-end engineers, we're hiring senior back-end, we do a lot of Node, so we have microservices architecture in Java and Node. We also do real-time messaging, so it's really heavily user-dependent. It's cool stuff, stuff that like sales and chat support people rely on to do their daily jobs. So it's a job where you can make something that somebody else uses every day, which is really cool. We're trying to do that kind of Slack style for communication, integrate with other tools, and really pull live chat out of 1995. We're just over on Congress on 301. We've got a small team, so come see me or come check out our site.
Cool. So help.com, hiring Node, and other various things. Real quick, anyone else? No? All right, I'll ask again at the end. Ready, Ted?
I'm ready.
Take it away.
So probably about 6 months ago, some friends of mine who work at Adobe asked me to step onto this. It was basically an alpha at the time. It's a small company named Fuse Tools. They're out of Oslo, and they've been writing UX, UI tool sets for native app development. And the reason I'm talking about it here is because the primary language is JavaScript, and they're actually using JavaScript runtime on both iOS and Android. And they have runtimes, they're looking at desktop deployment. And the UX on all of this is all hardware accelerated. It all runs on the GPU, and it's extremely fast. It's almost like a game engine for applications. And so the performance you get out of it is at the high end. It almost exceeds what you can do with the native SDKs on device. And it's the first tool set I've seen that basically moves almost past what's possible on native iOS SDK and also native Android. But it allows you to build both apps at the same time. Same exact code base, because it's all JavaScript. And the UX code basically compiles down to native and runs on the GPU. So let me just take you through it. So the target platforms are iOS and Android. It's a JavaScript runtime. It uses on iOS, it uses basically the JavaScript engine on iOS, but it uses the iOS JavaScript bridge to talk to native code. So all the JavaScript you're writing is basically running against callbacks and UI against a native app. It all runs on OpenGLES, so it's extremely fast. And actually, the OpenGLES chipsets are widely deployed. It's iOS 5 and up, and it's Android, I think, 3 and up. So you're talking about most of the devices people have and most of the OSs people have. So the odd part is that they have this native UX portion, which is all done in an XML dialect and a C# dialect called Uno. And the UX is basically XML, and there's bindings in the XML. I'll kind of walk you through it. But this is actually the code for it. And what's intriguing is to step into this as a web developer, this should make perfect sense. It's not any step of the imagination past what Web Components is aiming to do in terms of you're simply providing markup that does very complex layout. Now, all of this actually gets compiled down to native code, but then it has bindings back to JavaScript. And I'll show you some of the bindings as well. In this case, I've got an app with a panel, and then this panel basically deploys panels based on this array of data. And I'll show you where this array comes from, because it's actually in JavaScript. It's just a JavaScript, it's basically a JSON array. And then you have behavioral tags that you add up. So you can basically rotate a panel, a small series of degrees to set it into a position. That's really hard to do with native controls because you really lose all the design of the native controls just kind of goes out the window when you attempt to rotate a panel slightly or offset text and the like. So you can actually really get to a far end extreme UX experience. And I'll show you some of the other ones as well. But this is the JavaScript. So this is in a script tag inside of that, where it's an external JavaScript file. And what you do is you set up what's called observable. Observable does the bindings from JavaScript to the native code. And then you can set up functions. In this case, they have a city function, which is essentially a class. You're setting up some properties. And certain pieces of the data are made observable inside of that instance. They have a reset method. And then they have a series of module exports. And that's how you export everything into the app. So they're using the module syntax to just push JavaScript into the app and do bindings. So I showed you the each cities. This is actually the cities array. And the cities array is simply instances of a JavaScript object. And then you have basic methods and the like. And there's that city. So this is binding back to the JavaScript. So it's actually a pretty elegant way of doing data bindings. You're just quote brackets and it'll bind backwards. And also in the stack panel, for each one of these cities, you can bind to the name and the country. And those are also inside of the script elements as you create them. So this is actually something every single person in this room can do. There's nothing I have run into this in the tool set that isn't out of bounds. But what gets really cool is actually when you see it. So you deploy as an APK or an APP, native mobile development deployment. It has a small runtime, and then all the UX runs on OpenGL. It does have bindings to native controls, so it will actually use native controls in the operating system where it needs to bridge out dialogues, notifications, those type of things. Those stay native, but the app experience is all on OpenGL. The UNO files, you can basically take any component inside of the tool set and write an extension that extends it. So you can create a backing class, or you can create a full class extension for it. And you can get pretty deep, but you're in C# at that point. The app logic is JavaScript, but it isn't a stretch to hop back and forth between those. What is really unique is both the UX files, the UX and the JS files are hot loaded on the device. So you can actually do live development. And I've got the debugger actually running on my phone. And I'll show you this. So here's the app I actually have running. I take that back. I do not have that one running. Fantastic. The old shake the window, just to make sure it works. I go to this file system and I pull open this, you can basically see. So this is the actual app running, and it's pulled the UX and the JS files off my machine by a bridge. And I can basically, when I lift these, they get a drop shadow, and that you can actually navigate between two elements. What's very odd about this development metaphor is it actually lets you set up two pins where there's a radius, where if you get close to it, it changes the state of the UI. It's a very odd system, but it has gaming aspects in it, but it allows you to do rich UI that's, well, hard to do normally. Just reset that. You can actually see I go back into the background here. Let's save. So auto reload, and it basically reloads on device, pushing the UX files and the JavaScript on it. So you can actually do some pretty nice development. You can just leave the app running and basically edit away. And the workflow is pretty nice. The tool set's in beta, and actually the beta is now open. It's fusetools.com. I know some of the people who are on the team, and I've been utterly impressed with the quality of both the development team and the work that they're putting out. And as an aside, I'm working to sort of make this my tool set for doing any type of native development. I don't really want to touch native SDKs, but what is interesting is when you run the compiler here, it actually generates Xcode projects, so you can actually append other code in, and they're working on being able to create blended apps where some parts of your UI are made in Fuse, and you can then insert them into parts of existing iOS apps for experiential pieces, or sort of somewhat replace UI or reuse code. But that's it. That's Fuse. Yeah.
One of the hardest things about layout on devices is like handling mobile to tablet, and there's different actual like UX form factors. Does it deal with that at all?
It deals with it very well. So if you saw the panel sizing here, it actually has panel percentage sizing. So it basically did height 100%. But by default, the app window basically goes to, if I can show you the local, let me just quit this real quick. It is not linked, let me preview. That's wonderful. But it has a mode where it actually lets you run on the desktop, and you can actually hot switch between iPad, iPhone 6, Android, and any peripheral screen sizes. And all of the data binding, you can bind to top, bottom, left, and right. So you can actually do UI that is bound to edges of screens, tops of screens. So you can do really responsive type applications without the burden on, you write your application once and it basically works everywhere you put it. Even to the point where if you detected iPad, you can basically change layouts and configuration. Any other questions? Thank you. Yeah, cool, question.
So the Fuse app listens to the file system and kind of compiles it all?
Actually, what's happening is they're running a server on this machine, and my phone is connecting back via IP because it's on the same Wi-Fi network. So it's actually shuttling code and shuttling code deltas between them. And the server that's running locally handles compiling and building Xcode projects. So the Uno language is based on LLVM, so they back compile to, I think it's C++, and then they generate an Xcode project, and that's it. And they can also do the same thing on Android back. It's really interesting tech. I haven't seen somebody go as far as what they've actually done. And the experience on devices is actually quite good.
So it's OS X and Windows right now?
iOS and Android.
Oh, but like the
development is cross-platform, so it's Windows and Mac.
Any plans for Linux? Do you
know? No idea.
Okay.
No idea. But most of their tool set on device is actually written in their tools, so I wouldn't be surprised if they go after Windows and iOS. All they require is an OpenGL subset, which is the OpenGL ES3. Once you have that, it can run on any device, so they can run on any handset. Thanks.
All right, Rod, are you ready?
I sure am.
And while Rod's getting set up, did anyone else come up with any questions or comments or firing? So while Rod is setting up, I will mention.
That's how quick I am.
I'll mention it after Rod's done.
Hello, everyone. I'm going to talk to you about Firebase. My name is Rod Machin. I am a former high school English teacher and current student at Hack Reactor, which is on the West Coast time, so I'm technically skipping class right now. But luckily, this is being broadcast around the world, so it's fine. I am mainly interested in JavaScript things and been playing around with Node.js. In fact, Evan helped me get my first open source contribution to Node, no less. All right, so Firebase. What is Firebase? It is a backend as a service. It is very popular with Angular, and that'll make sense here in a second. It's essentially real-time, easy to set up backend for projects. So kind of the opposite of Node, but it is very easy to use, as I'm going to show you. So it was, in the last year or so, acquired by Google, and so I think that bodes well for its health. Hopefully it'll stay free for developers and things like that, but it seems to be pretty healthy and growing. So I'm going to show you, I made this little project, really just a way to use Angular and just do kind of a little thing with it. And it's you build a football roster form, fills in a table. So I started off with just doing this locally, no persistence, anything, and then I kept going and added local storage through Angular. And it was actually very easy to take that same thing, that local storage, and put it into this Firebase where it was persistent and could be shared across, from everyone. So hope you appreciate my green text here. That's as big as I can make it. But you need three things to make this happen. Of course, Angular, for using that. Firebase has its own file, and then also there's a thing called Angular Fire, which is a module that essentially links the two together and makes it all very, very easy, as you'll see here in a minute. I just have the CDNs, but you can, of course, download the files. So start off with just a standard Angular module, and you import Firebase. After that, the controller, then you pass in, here I have Firebase Array, $Firebase Array. That can also be Firebase Object, and that is from the Angular Fire. And so what's really cool about this is Firebase does not like arrays. As you'll see here, Firebase is essentially just a big object in the sky for you to play with. And that's not an array. And so you try to iterate it over like an array and it doesn't work. So what Angular Fire does with this Firebase array is it tricks it into thinking it's an array and gives it these randomized key names so that for all intents and purposes, it's an array. And so you can see here, the important part here is the line var players. That is instantiating a new Firebase instance and then passing it into the Firebase array. And now I've got this players object, which with Angular, I just link it together to the scope, scope.players. And at that point, it's just an object. Like it's just a thing I can use and treat like anything else. Here I've got a function that adds a player and takes everything from the form and puts it in there. I've also got this thing that'll, if all of the players get X'd out and deleted, it'll put in a couple of dummy items in there. But all of that, the only thing to notice here is you see $add. You can't use push because it is not an actual array, but as long as you use the $add and act like that's push, then it works great. And so that's how easy it is. Very easy to get up and running, and especially with starting off in a project before you need an enormous back end, it's a great way to start off. So you can ask me questions now, or I'll be around. Here are all the ways that I'm online, Twitter and email on my coding blog. I actually did a post on this same thing, so if you want to look and see some things written out, you can see it at code.rodmation.com. Awesome, thanks.
Out of curiosity, has anyone used Firebase? A few people, cool. Is Alan here? Alan. So Alan's going to talk to us about his project that looks kind of interesting for measuring your application speed from your actual users.
Yep.
So let's hear about that. Are you set up on the network?
Yeah.
What I was going to mention before I also leave me off is afterwards we tend to head over to Buffalo Billiards if anyone's interested. And there's rumor that yeah, I don't think I have one up here. There's a rumor that there might be a round covered. Is that true? Yeah, so if you're interested, the first round I think is going to be covered by PayPal.
Just pizzas.
If that piques anyone's interest, the kegerator guy, I expect you to be there for sure. But we usually have, good discussion and whatnot, so if you're interested, follow us over there.
Actually, I don't.
Are you looking for this, or?
Yeah.
While we're waiting, does anyone have any good node jokes or anything? All right.
Doesn't sound like very chill.
I read a joke on Twitter the other day. It said, a noun, an adjective, and a verb walk into a bar. No, that wasn't it. I've already mangled it. Punchline was it was tense, but I screwed up the joke, so forget it. All right, thank goodness I'm done. You're done.
Hi. So I'm working on a project called Rasterize. Right now I'm just doing it in my spare time. Hope to be doing it full time very soon though. So Rasterize is website performance monitoring measured from the browser. There's a new JavaScript API called window.performance.timing, and it gives you most of the information from Chrome DevTools in JavaScript. So I collect all of that, and then so it's kind of a real user monitoring thing, but it's more of a focus on browser speed. I'll get to why there in a second. These charts are kind of boring. Better. So you get like a complete list of all your URLs, and then here we go. So one of my beta users, this is measuring. So this is the DOM complete time for all of their users worldwide in real time. Right now everything's red because they're slow for now, but yeah, you can go look. Oh look, let's go look at why the users in England are slow, and then you get a complete list of who's visiting, and then you get most of the Chrome DevTools timing information for every user. So we can say, oh, this person was in Ohio, they're on Chrome, and then we can look at their download times. And then of course they give you warnings about things you can do better. So page analysis, you're not compressing things, you're serving images too big to mobile users, you're not concatenating. Send you alerts on page load times, or on page weight increases and page time increases. And so, yeah, let's get to why, fun little tool, but why do this? And basically the answer is money. Amazon showed that, so this factoid one, these are Walmart's slides. Factoid number one is something Amazon said. Every 100 millisecond delay they see on page load times, they lose 1% of revenue. Factoid two, this is Google. Every 500 millisecond delay caused a 20% drop in traffic. And then Walmart also found so this is Walmart's presentation on page speed slides, or on page speed. This is their conversion rate versus page load times. So you can see a very clear drop off as your page load goes from 1 second to 2 seconds to 3 seconds. And then I replicated that with a startup here in Austin. This is my data. So they're actually very similar, which makes you think the same consumer behavior is going on. So just to be clear on this, the blue line here is the population percentage. So this is every user at the site. There's a nice bell curve around 4 or 5 second page loads. And so if page load times didn't matter, you would expect to see a straight line here, right? You just have everybody converts at 4% no matter how fast you load. But instead you see a very clear spike that the faster the page loads, more likely people are to buy. So yeah, that's what I'm working on.
So what's your actual pricing or business model or whatever?
It's monthly SaaS. I don't have pricing yet, but standard SaaS tiers.
We test it?
Yes. I'm open for beta. It's pretty rough right now, as you can see, but it does work. It does send you emails, I think. No, it does send you emails. It does collect data. I'm working on more useful analysis, but that just needs more feedback of what do you see and what do you want to see, that kind of thing. Yeah, so it's rasterize.io, and you can sign up. You can ask me questions. You can. Yep.
What kind of browser support do you have right now?
Everything that supports the API. So that's all modern desktops. So that's IE above 8, I think. All Android for the last year or two. iOS above 9. Well, all right. Thanks.
Thanks.
And last but not least, Lyle, talk to us about Greenkeeper. How many people use NPM for our stuff? Pretty much everyone. Cool. So this one will be really good. This is a problem I'm sure we all have. I have myself. How to keep dependencies up to date, or even know when things change and what might break. So I'm very interested in this one. We're going to be off the next couple of months because our meetup pretty much corresponds almost exactly with Thanksgiving and Christmas. So you could almost say I planned it that way, but I actually didn't. But we are going to be off the next couple of months. So I think the next big thing we're going to do, if anyone is aware of the big bash, what's it called, the web bash that they do every year, we'll probably be involved in that. But other than that, January, if anyone is interested, even though it is going to be a while, but if you appreciate these lightning talks and have a topic that you might want to present or whatever, hit us up and we can certainly get started in January.
Hello. So I'll be real quick. My name is Lyle Garza. I have no affiliation at all with this project. I was at JSConf last month and saw them present it, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is exactly what we've been needing for the last year of my project I was running. So we all, from the show of hands, I saw that there's a lot of NPM users here. NPM is really great. It has this really vibrant community. There's this really nice cultural embracement of making these small modules that do one thing really well. And the problem with that is that now you have even like trivial libraries or applications, and you have a lot of dependencies. And you need to, those dependencies are constantly being pushed and changed, and you have to stay on top of that with your project. So the default way, if you do an npm install, there's actually that caret in there, and it gives you a range. We have Simber, so it's going to bump up the minor versions. If you have the tilde, it'll give you the patch versions. So that doesn't always work. People aren't always super trustworthy with that responsibility of how they do their versioning. So if you're like me, we'll actually peg to exact revisions because you don't like coming in to work with a broken build when you've been off all weekend. So that's actually becomes a big time sink now because you have to keep up with all these packages that you depend on, and you have to, I might do like a list of my outdated packages and then install a bunch of them really quickly, and then something's broken, I don't know what did it, so I have to go back and do it one by one, and it can be very tedious and time consuming. So what Greenkeeper does, it actually, I don't know if people realize, like npm, the metadata is actually stored in CouchDB, so there's a changes feed that gets published on that. So they subscribe to that feed, and if they see that a package that you're using has changed, they actually will go to your project, create a branch and a pull request, and apply it back into your project. So you can see this is just a silly app that I run, but just today, there was 2 things that were published, and I have these pull requests, and now I can see that this one new package was applied to it. It actually has my Travis continuous integration right here. I can see all my build worked. If it fails, I can see my what test actually failed. So you do have to write good tests, but I'm sure we all do that, so it's not a problem. But it'll catch that, and then I can even, several things have happened today, and I can actually go one by one and make sure that, this new version of React DOM came out, and that this is, could isolate these errors, and then I can just apply them, merge the new changes into the newer branches and go from there. And you can actually, I couldn't find this in their documentation, but I've heard the founders mention that, so I have a Travis YAML file, and I say I'm supporting 4.0, that they will actually bump it up to 5 when that comes out, and will actually give you a heads up on what packages would fail once the new version of Node came out. So it's a neat little project. It follows the same type of licensing that GitHub and Travis do, free for all public projects. I think it's like $15 a month for private repo support. So I've been using it for all my public projects the last few weeks, and it's been really cool, and it really keeps your GitHub streak alive. And it's kind of made the whole thing worthless, so that's a good thing. So yeah, check it out. Thanks.
So, question is the diff, is it just updating your package JSON, I assume? Is that
yeah, that's all it is. But it does say I have my Travis integration, which will run my unit test that I'm associated with it, and that will actually do like a build and run my deployments on it.
And then also, since you've been using it on average, like how many do you get per day or per week?
It's actually pretty frequent, because I do peg to exact revisions. If I would only peg to, say, the minor or even the patch buttons, I wouldn't get nearly as much, but it's just whatever works for you. I was working in the online payment industry, and we were very crazy about regressions, and we didn't want to have things slip by without going through a normal process. So everything was always pegged at like exact revisions.
So if you peg the patch or whatever, or you make it'll actually for a minor revision, it'll send you only for minor revisions. It'll go to the next level up basically.
Yeah. So I'm like, oh, I care, right? So it's only going to send me major revisions. Tell Node, yeah,
Very
give me a
cool.
minor.
That's-
So, yeah, so it's all about what you
Your
what you
trust
feel
level with your
comfortable with.
package.
Yeah, and some projects I don't care, and some I do. So I think it's kind of depends on getting money in it too. So thanks.
Yeah, this one looks really cool. There's a project that I talked about in the meetup a couple of months ago called like Libraries.io, I think.
Very similar.
Yeah, and that one, it's sort of similar, but all you get from Libraries.io is an email saying this package changed, but it doesn't tell you if it's going to break your code or not. So this is kind of like that idea taken to the next step, which is really cool. So thanks for that. Thanks a lot, guys, for all the contributions tonight. Thanks, Evan, for the talk. Does anyone have any final questions or comments before we leave? Cool. So hopefully we'll see some of you over there at Buffalo Billiards. And if we don't, have a nice holiday and we'll see you next year.